You were not born broken. Everything that hurt you was shaping you. And what if I told you that nothing in your childhood was accidental? People spend their whole lives trying to get rid of the past. But your past isn't trying to knock you down. It's trying to wake you up. The truth is harsh, and maybe no one has ever had the courage to tell you this, but here it is. What you went through wasn't bad luck. It was architecture. Every pain, every silence, every shadow you carried in childhood was shaping a level of awareness that very few people in this world have. And as strange as it sounds, everything you wanted to forget is exactly what makes you so different and so prepared. While many were spared, you were refined. While others learned from books, you learned from real life. That's why you feel so deeply, notice things so quickly, and understand so much more than you'd like. And most importantly, this didn't condemn you. It handed you a mission. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why nothing you went through was random, and how this story that seemed like a sentence was actually your calling for transformation all along. If you've ever felt there's something bigger inside you, something no one has ever been able to explain, this video is going to put everything in its place. From an early age, that childhood marked by silent pain felt like an impossible weight to carry, but those watching from the outside never realized how much it was shaping your inner world. He grew up thinking he was just trying to survive, when in reality he was being shaped by a kind of invisible force. It's strange how life, even when it's harsh, works behind the scenes, pushing a person toward an awakening they'll only understand much later. The child who cried in secret was also learning to read the world through the shadow of events. And even though no one explained this to him at the time, that feeling of abandonment was building resilience. The pain felt unfair, but it was fertile ground being prepared. And that is exactly where the mystery lies that almost no one sees. He didn't realize, for example, that by reading the mood swings of the adults around him, he was developing a rare emotional awareness. While other children played without thinking about anything, he was learning to decode facial expressions, tone of voice, and intentions. That would later become a strength, the ability to feel what isn't being said, like a radar built in silence. Often, this ability is born from a trauma that seems small to others, but is gigantic to the one who lived it. And it's precisely in those small fragments that life hides your mission. And when someone finally understands this, transformation begins in an almost inevitable way. The pain he carried was like seeds buried in hard soil. Nothing seemed to grow there, but time was working in silence. He learned to watch everything, like someone trying to predict the storm before it arrives. That exaggerated caution, so common in those who grew up in unstable environments, actually creates a rare power, anticipation. People like that develop the ability to see patterns where others see only chaos. It's like reading a closed book. And even if it looks like just a defense mechanism, it's actually preparation for a future awakening, something he still couldn't understand. As the years passed, that shadow that once scared him began to reveal that nothing he went through was by chance. He realized that situations that used to crush him now awakened a strange, almost instinctive strength. And when he noticed this, he began to see value in the resilience built by pain. Some adults spend years chasing courses, tools, and answers to develop emotional intelligence, while he, without realizing it, had already been trained by a school no one chooses. That school, though harsh, polishes people with a unique clarity, and that clarity, deep down, is the prelude to something greater. And this is where many people get it wrong. They think what they went through in childhood broke them, when in reality, it prepared them. He began to realize that his mission, although still blurry, was deeply connected to what hurt the most. Every difficulty created transformation, even if it was subtle. What used to be trauma had now become a tool, and life, in a nearly poetic way, seemed to be saying that all of it was paving a road. A road that only becomes clearer when he decides to look inward. And when he does that, something new starts to reveal itself. He grew up believing that everything he had lived was just weight, but without realizing it, every pain in his childhood was building an expanded awareness. It's as if life had put special lenses over his eyes. Lenses only people who went through trauma develop. While most move through existence half asleep, he learned to feel deeply. That strength didn't come from comfort, but from the need to understand the world in order to survive in it. Resilience became his second skin, shaped by hard days. And at the core of it, that ability to perceive the invisible is a rare kind of awakening. Something that, sooner or later, starts to reveal the purpose hidden behind the shadows. Jung always mentioned that consciousness is built, not given. He is living proof of that. Every unfair situation, every word that hurt, every silence that cut deep, all of it was forming a deeper perception of life. It's as if he'd been invited to see what everyone else insists on ignoring. People who never walk through shadow rarely develop depth. He, on the other hand, discovered that pain polishes the soul the way fire tempers metal, and that silent polishing turned him into someone capable of looking at himself with rare honesty, something uncommon at any time in history. And when he finally realized that what he'd survived had turned into power, something shifted inside him. He started to notice that his strength didn't come from victories, but from the falls that forced him to get back up. A simple example. While some people need therapy just to understand basic emotions, he always had the ability to feel what was behind them. It's like walking into a room and sensing the energy before anyone speaks. That ability, born from trauma, can feel like a burden, but it's a powerful tool. And the more he understands that, the more he realizes there is a mission hidden in this whole path. The awareness he developed works like an inner compass. It points to paths most people never see. He learned early on to be wary, to observe, to analyze, to interpret, not because he wanted to, but because he had to. That necessity shaped an impressive intuitive strength. People like that can sense danger before impact, the problem before the explosion, and even the lie before it's spoken. It's as if life had handed him a map that only appears when it's lit by pain. And even if he doesn't fully understand this gift, he's already starting to feel where it's pointing. And now, looking back, he sees something essential. Surviving didn't just make him tough, it woke him up. Every experience, no matter how heavy, built a wisdom he didn't even know he carried. That deep awareness that walks with him was not born by accident. It was built brick by brick, night after night. And as that understanding grows, a quiet question starts to rise within him. A question that inevitably leads him to face the shadow he always tried to avoid. He grew up believing that the shadow was something to be avoided, as if what hurt in childhood were stains that needed to be hidden. But over time, he realized the shadow wasn't an enemy. It was a map. Everything he tried to ignore, repress, or push away was full of clues about who he really was. The pain that felt like it was suffocating him was actually a silent invitation to awaken. Certain parts of himself, born from trauma, were sources of strength still asleep. And when he began to see that, his awareness expanded in a way he had never experienced before. It's fascinating how the shadow always holds what we fear the most, and at the same time, what we most need. He realized that feelings of inadequacy, fear, and insecurity were not personal flaws. They were old scars asking to be seen. Every painful fragment carried a key to transformation. Some might call that self-knowledge, but in practice it's simpler. It's finally stopping to face what you've spent your whole life running from. When he did that, he found within himself a resilience he never imagined he had, as if he were reclaiming territory in his own emotional landscape. He started to see that the shadow works like a basement of the soul, dark, messy, full of unopened boxes. Inside those boxes are treasures mixed with tough memories. Opening one is uncomfortable, but necessary. Instead of avoiding, he began opening one box at a time, carefully and courageously. He found childhood memories that explained his current behavior, finally understanding why certain triggers hit him so deeply. That process, although painful, brought a surprising inner strength. And little by little, the shadow stopped being a threat. It became direction. Over time, he realized that what he called defects were exactly what made him unique. People who have been through trauma carry a kind of sensitivity that few understand. That sensitivity, when integrated, becomes power. Imagine turning fear into refined courage, insecurity into sharp analysis, pain into genuine empathy. That's exactly what started happening. He realized, for example, that his intense reactions weren't exaggeration. They were the memory of the soul speaking. And the more he integrated these parts, the clearer his mission in the world became. And then came the greatest revelation. The shadow was never trying to destroy him. It was trying to guide him. Every forgotten fragment pointed to a larger calling, a broader awareness. He still didn't fully understand that calling, but he could feel something deep lining up inside him. As if each painful piece was finally finding its place. That strength that had been buried by a hard childhood was now beginning to emerge. And with it, a new kind of clarity was born. A clarity that would inevitably lead him to something even more surprising. For a long time, he believed that a childhood marked by pain meant weakness. He thought feeling too much, fearing too much, analyzing too much was a flaw, when in fact it was emotional training. While others grew up in stable environments, he learned to survive in the middle of the dark, and that forced him to develop strength in a way no one could see. What looked like trauma was, in reality, preparation. The resilience that blossomed there could never have been born in an easy life. That's why today he notices details most people simply miss. He remembers situations where he felt way too small, like when he had to measure every word to avoid conflict at home. What seemed unfair at the time trained his awareness to pick up on tension long before it exploded. Today, that ability has become a rare kind of emotional wisdom. It's like smelling rain before the clouds turn dark. People like him develop a strategic sensitivity. They can see risk, intention, and even lies with uncanny ease. Not because of magic, but repetition. He'd been trained since he was a child, even if no one noticed. While people who never face trauma grow up unprepared for real life, he had already gone through trials that forged his inner strength. His emotional world was tempered like steel in the fire. It bends, yes, but it doesn't break. It's the kind of strength no one values until they desperately need it. He learned to read the human soul with precision, not because he studied complex theories, but because his childhood demanded it. And that deep reading of the world is now his advantage. Almost like a silent superpower hardly anyone understands. When he looks back, he realizes that everything that made him cry in the dark also taught him how to stand in the light. Life put weight on his shoulders before he was ready, but those weights, ironically, made him stronger. He became someone capable of handling situations that would paralyze many. Pain turned into preparation. Shadow turned into teacher. And with each fall, some new inner transformation took place. He didn't become strong by choice. He became strong out of necessity. And that changes everything in the way his awakening unfolds. Now he knows that not a single moment was wasted. Everything was part of a bigger mission. What others might call weakness was, in truth, the foundation of his strength. And the more he acknowledges that, the more he sees that the training never really ended. It just changed form. The past keeps working inside him like a compass, pointing toward directions he doesn't fully understand yet. And it's precisely that growing awareness that opens the door to the next insight, the one that will finally shine a light on the voice he kept hidden for so many years. He spent much of his childhood carrying a silence that felt crushing. It wasn't the kind of silence you choose. It's the kind you learn. The pain locked in his chest, the shadow no one else could see, the constant need not to bother anyone. All of that shaped his awareness in ways he'd only understand years later. Back then, the silence felt like punishment, but little by little, he discovered it was turning into something much bigger, a powerful inner voice, sharp and precise. A voice that observes before it speaks, feels before it reacts, and understands before it judges. That forced silence trained him to hear what no one else was hearing. He learned to notice nuance, tone, discomfort hidden in the smallest gestures. While others leaned on noise to assert themselves, he got stronger in deep listening. And listening is a rare kind of strength. The world tries to teach that talking loud is power, but he discovered the opposite. The one who understands first leads best. His awakening started right there, the moment he realized the silence he carried with pain had become one of his most valuable instruments. Over time, he began to notice that his sensitivity was a kind of emotional radar. He could connect with people in a way most couldn't explain. That radar was born from old traumas, but it turned into a mission not to repeat patterns, to heal what hurt, to transform his own story into a more conscious path. It's as if life had hidden strength inside what looked like weakness, and only now that strength was beginning to surface clearly, ready to show him what to do with all of it. Slowly, the silence stopped being just protection and became language. He discovered that his words, when chosen carefully, carried a deep impact on people. Someone who spent a lifetime quiet learns to speak with truth, doesn't waste words, doesn't overact emotions, doesn't speak just to fill the air. He says what's essential, and what's essential always goes deeper than any shout. This internal shift is one of the most beautiful parts of the process. What once seemed like trauma turns into light. What once seemed like shadow becomes direction, and what once was pain becomes crystal clear awareness. And now, when he looks inside, he realizes his voice was never gone. It was maturing, growing in silence so it could be born strong. And that voice, so powerful today, didn't appear by accident. It was built, polished, and shaped by his own childhood. But there's something even deeper about to emerge. The relationship between that child who learned to protect himself and the adult who now begins to see beyond. A subtle but decisive connection setting the stage for the next insight. During childhood, he learned to protect himself in ways no one could see. He built quiet mechanisms to deal with the pain crossing his home, developing a sensitivity that felt heavy at first, but would later reveal his true strength. He became attentive, observant, almost intuitive. Every gesture, every harsh word, every emotional shadow was recorded without him even noticing. That early awareness prepared him to see the world differently. It wasn't exaggeration, it was survival. And that survival planted the seeds of the awakening that would come in adulthood. The child who needed to predict everyone's mood became the adult who sees nuances others miss. He can sense when someone is hurt, even behind a smile. He feels when a truth is being hidden behind an uncomfortable silence. That ability, born from trauma, is now a tool for his mission. People seek him out without really knowing why, but it's because of that capacity to understand beyond words. What once looked like just pain turned into an expanded vision of the world, almost like seeing life in emotional high definition. That child who protected himself learned to create internal maps of people, behaviors, risks. Those maps are still with him today, guiding his decisions with surprising precision. He can tell when someone is genuine, when someone is insecure, when someone is manipulating. Many call that a gut feeling, but for him it's organized emotional memory. The real transformation came when he realized those maps, once used only to avoid pain, could now be used to build awareness, connection, and even leadership. What's most curious is how the parts of him born from shadow became his greatest talents. The resilience shaped in childhood turned into emotional courage. His sensitivity turned into strategic perception. His silence turned into deep reading. He discovered that the adult who sees beyond only exists because the child learned how to protect himself. It's a continuous line, a bridge between what hurt and what awakened. And when he brings those parts together, he sees that nothing was in vain. Everything pointed toward a transformation he is only starting to grasp. Now, when he looks at his own story, he understands that the child was never weak. The child was clever, intuitive, wise. And this adult, with all his strength and awareness, is the direct result of that. There are still many answers hidden in the relationship between his past and present. Answers that begin to show themselves more clearly when he sees that the environment that hurt him was, paradoxically, his first teacher. And that realization opens the door to the next insight that's about to come. He spent years believing the environment that hurt him in childhood was just cruelty from fate. But with time, he began to see something few people ever realize, that environment was his first teacher, shaping his awareness before he even knew what learning was. The pain that felt so unjust was teaching him about limits, about human nature, about the importance of protecting his own sensitivity. Every shadow crossing that house taught more than any book ever could. And even though it left deep marks, it also planted strength and resilience where no one thought anything could grow. He later realized that while other children were learning math and playing without a care in the world, he was learning to read emotions, learning to predict conflict, learning to survive emotionally. What seemed like pure trauma would become, in the future, a rare kind of knowledge. This kind of wisdom isn't found in courses, it's carved in real life, in tense silences, in choked-back shouting, in glances that say more than 1,000 words. And paradoxically, what hurt him most was exactly what awakened his ability to deeply understand others. That difficult environment taught him to recognize patterns. It was as if he had daily classes in human behavior. Even though he'd never asked for them, he learned to see signs of instability, to spot lies, to tell the difference between love and manipulation. That sharp reading of the world was born out of discomfort, out of the need to protect himself. And precisely because of that, it became a strength. The real shift happened when he understood that this uninvited learning did not chain him to the past. On the contrary, it prepared him to handle any complex situation in adult life. And what's even more interesting is that looking back with more maturity, he began to see that the environment wasn't just the problem, it was the mirror. It showed what needed to be worked on, what needed healing, what needed to be set free. It showed that his mission was not to carry pain, but to transform it. And that changes everything. Because when someone recognizes that the environment was also a teacher, not just an aggressor, a new kind of awareness is born. The kind that allows them to choose a different path. Now, with that clarity, he understands that environment was the beginning of the story, not the end. He learned lessons there that many people only discover decades later, and he realizes that life was just preparing the ground for something greater. There is still a hidden root inside all of this learning, a root that points to an inner power he may have avoided seeing for a long time. And it is precisely that root that will naturally lead him to the next insight. He spent much of his life trying to ignore certain memories from childhood, believing that looking at them would only make everything hurt again. But what he didn't realize is that right there, in the deepest part of the shadow, was the root of his strength. The awareness he has today was born from the very points he most wanted to avoid. And it's strange how what we hide never really disappears. It just waits for the right moment to reveal itself as an essential piece of our transformation. Every stored trauma holds energy, and repressed energy comes back as a calling. When he finally decided to face those forgotten parts, he realized they weren't monsters. They were memories asking to be understood. He discovered that the fear he'd been avoiding was actually a bridge to awakening, and crossing that bridge allowed him to find fragments of himself that made him stronger, more aware, more whole. There is no real strength without contact with your own shadow. He learned that the hard way. The pain stopped being a threat and became fuel. And that inner shift opened space for a new perception of who he really is. As he revisited old memories, he realized some of his current reactions had their roots back in childhood. He understood why he avoided certain places, why he felt small in certain conversations, why he was so quick to distrust. None of that was a defect. It was history. And history, when understood, becomes power. He began to reinterpret those feelings, dropping self-blame and replacing it with self-compassion. It's like walking into a dark room with a flashlight and discovering nothing there is as terrifying as it seemed. The transformation began exactly in that act of courage, and when he realized the root of his strength was in what he'd rejected, he understood something essential. There is no healing without returning. He needed to go back and reclaim the parts of himself that were still trapped in the past. That journey wasn't light, but it was freeing. He found resilience where he thought there was only weakness. He found emotional intelligence where he thought there was only trauma. He found mission where he used to see only confusion. Everything was there, waiting for him to have the courage to truly look. Now he knows that the power he carries today was born precisely from what he tried to forget. The root of his strength had always been hidden in the shadow, asking to be integrated. But that discovery is only half the journey. There is something even deeper about to reveal itself, something that invites him not only to free the past, but also to release the versions of himself that no longer make sense. A revelation that naturally leads him to the next insight. During childhood, he had to create a version of himself just to survive the pain. It was a version strong on the outside, silent on the inside, always alert to the emotional weather in the room. That version learned to protect itself from other people's shadows, shaping his awareness with survival strategies that, back then, were essential. For a while, that mask was his armor. It protected his sensitivity when no one else would. But now, as an adult, he's beginning to see that this defensive strength is no longer necessary. What once saved him has now become a cage. And that realization is the first step of true transformation. He always believed he had to be hypervigilant, suspicious, guarded. But with emotional awakening, he realized that rigid stance was an inheritance from trauma, not a conscious choice. It was the old version of him trying to guarantee survival in a world that has already changed. Many people carry this emotional armor for decades without noticing that it blocks real connection. He began to understand that he can let his shoulders drop, breathe deeply, and allow himself to be seen. The resilience built in childhood is still there, but now it can be used in a different way. Letting that mask rest is not simple. It's like asking a soldier to lower his weapon after years of war. But he realized that when he drops his guard, he doesn't become weak. He becomes real. His awareness expands when the weight of constant defense starts to fall away. He discovers he can trust without feeling like he's putting his whole existence at risk. That he can love without assuming he'll be hurt again. That he can act without always expecting the worst from everyone. It's a slow transformation, but a liberating one. The version he created in childhood was heroic. It protected what was sensitive, guarded what was pure. kept alive a spark of strength he didn't even know he had. But that mission is now complete. The adult he has become has the resources, clarity, and maturity to walk without that exaggerated protection. He realizes that as he allows that old version to rest, new layers of authenticity begin to surface, and that authenticity opens doors the armor would never allow him to walk through. And it's exactly at that point, when he finally releases the old version, that something unexpected happens. An inner space opens up, a new lightness appears. And with it, a quiet question begins to grow. If that mask is no longer needed, what is life trying to show me now? The answer is closer than he imagines, and the next insight will lead him straight to the heart of his mission. Looking back, he finally understands that nothing he went through in childhood was random. The pain that marked him, the shadow that followed him, the silence he carried, all of it was sketching a specific path, a path that only now begins to make sense. He sees that every piece of his journey was shaping his awareness for something that goes beyond himself. The strength that came out of his scars was not a fluke. The resilience that grew out of trauma was not coincidence. It was a calling to live a transformation that very few people ever access. Life, with all its harshness, had been sending messages that he's only now able to decode. He realizes that surviving wasn't enough. He needed to understand why. And when he connects the dots, something lights up inside, as if everything that hurt him had been trying to lead him toward a greater mission, a mission that involves understanding, healing, and transforming. He discovers that the sensitivity he once saw as weakness is his most powerful tool, that the pain he thought was a flaw was actually preparation, that his story has always been pushing him in the same direction, even when he had no idea where he was going. That's the moment he understands the deepest truth. Life shaped him to see what most people never see, to feel what most people can't stand to feel, to hold space where most would walk away. That awareness didn't come from privilege, it came from battle. His hard childhood was the first chapter of a book he's only now able to read clearly, and when he recognizes that calling, he sees there is nothing more liberating than turning what hurt him into purpose. It's the alchemy of shadow into light, trauma into direction, pain into mission. With that clarity, he begins to see himself as someone who was prepared for something bigger than just surviving. Every forgotten fragment of his past clicks into place like pieces of a puzzle that finally reveals its full picture. He understands that his transformation is not just personal, it ripples outward. It touches others, inspires others, awakens others. And that's why he has never been so close to understanding the true value of his own journey. The calling isn't back there, it's here, now, echoing inside him. And it's at this point, where his pain meets his purpose, that an inevitable question appears. If all of this was preparation, then what exactly is life asking him to do with this wisdom? That question pulses like an open doorway, inviting him to take the next step. A step that requires courage, but promises clarity. And it's right at this bend in the road that the story opens into something even more powerful, something that begins to be born inside him the moment he finally accepts who he really is. You made it this far because deep down you always knew your story was hiding something bigger. And now that you understand your difficult childhood wasn't a punishment, but a calling, the real question is, what are you going to do with that? It's not enough to just understand. You have to transform. The pain you went through shaped unique abilities in you, a level of awareness that very few people have, and that only makes sense when you decide to use that strength in your favor. So stop for a moment and really think, what are you still carrying that you could have let go of already? What part of you is still living in survival mode? And what would change in your life if you finally accepted that you were never weak, you were being prepared? Your mission begins when you choose to change. When you decide to look inward without fear, When you understand that your story doesn't limit you, it propels you. And maybe this is exactly the moment when everything starts to line up for you. If this video helped you see your life with more clarity, drop a comment. I understood my calling. That might be the first real step in your transformation. And it might also inspire other people who are living the same journey. And before you go, do something for yourself. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep walking with me on this path of awareness, depth, and awakening. There is still so much inside you waiting to be revealed.